and welcome to my contribution for the YouTube Artist Collective theme, Mythological Characters. Now, there was a lot of ideas that I had when it came to this piece in particular, but I was in particularly drawn to the story of Persephone. Now, I will go into the story of Persephone a little bit later on in this video, but I thought I'd give a little bit of time to explain about the YouTube Artist Collective and my art piece. So the YouTube Artist Collective is a group of artists, and every few months we do a collaboration project where we work on a similar theme. Now, if you are not an official member of the YouTube Artist Collective, you can take part in any of the themes. We leave the themes up to you guys to vote, and this time it was chosen to be mythological creatures. Now, there will be links down below to everyone's channel and a link to the playlist if you are interested in checking out everyone's videos. But this theme had my mind rolling. I am really into ancient folklore and researching into about gods and goddesses in different cultures, just because I find it to be very fascinating for me in particular. Now, Greek folklore has always fascinated me. I love the stories of the gods, despite how complicated that they can get. It's always interested me. There's a reason why I genuinely love the story of Hercules, not only because of the Disney franchise film, but it always fascinated me, the story of someone who was a mortal but also a god. It's always really interested me. And when I was doing my research into this, I was thinking about folklore and mythological characters that are associated with folklore. I was thinking about doing some British folklore mythological characters, maybe the story of King Arthur. But I was kept on drawing back to the Greek mythology, and as I was doing my research, I fell in love with a webcomic called Lore Olympus, which I will also link down below. Now, the webcomic does have some problematic theming, as it does go along the story of Persephone and Hades, so I will give you a small warning in that aspect. There is some sensitive material in there, but the webcomic is just done so beautifully, and I was heavily inspired by that for this piece. The piece that I'm doing is a watercolor based piece on Persephone, and I wanted the colors to contrast to show the overworld and the underworld and the fact that she was torn between the two sides. I wanted a very cool palette at the bottom with a very warm palette, with her in the middle with the pomegranate seeds, which I will explain why that's all important later on when I go through reading the story. The full list of equipment, as always, is listed down below. But this webcomic really inspired the colours that I was using for this piece, so I have to fully credit the webcomic artist that used Anbade for this. I really think that the work is phenomenal and really think that you should check them out. They really inspired me for this story, and it's fascinating as well because I was drawn to this because it said that she was the goddess of spring and rebirth, and since I am obsessed with spring at the moment and all my pieces are being influenced by it, it just felt that this was the right fit for me right now. There was many other things I had considered. As I said, I'm really into folklore and researching it. I did think about doing an Egyptian god. I did think about doing very old British folklores, and I was doing a lot of research into this, and I decided to do Persephone. So I'm going to read you the story of Persephone in a second. I will be also linking the website that I did get the story from as well. But I really hope you guys enjoyed this video and enjoyed the story. But now it's story time. So the website I actually use to do a lot of my research is a website called Greeker.com. I'll be linking it down below. It has a lot of information on Greece in general, but it has some really nice full breakdowns of the myths and the legends of the Greek gods and goddesses. And I thought this was a really good way for me to be able to do my research and come to understand a lot of what I was trying to do when it came to this illustration. So I'll be reading the page on here. I'll leave it down below in case you want to read it in your own terms, but let's do the story time. So the story of Persephone, the sweet daughter of the goddess Demeter, who was kidnapped by Hades and later became the queen of the underworld, is known all over the world. It is actually the way for ancient Greeks to explain the change of the seasons, the eternal cycle of nature's death and rebirth. Persephone is understood in people's mind as a naive little girl who flows between the protection of the mother and the love of her husband. The myth of Persephone was very popular in ancient times, and it's said that story was represented in Eleusinian mysteries, in the great and secret celebrations of the ancient Greece. Now, I personally don't see Persephone as a naive little girl. I see her as a goddess who came to understand what her role was, but to each their own, really. So we're going to talk about the full breakdown of actually what happened to Persephone and how she became the goddess of the underworld, the queen of the underworld, if you want to call it that. According to Greek mythology, Persephone, the queen of the underworld, was the daughter of Zeus and Demeter, who's the goddess of harvest and fertility. She was also called Kor, which means maiden, and grew up to be a lovely girl attracting the attention of many gods. However, Demeter had an obsessed love for her only daughter and kept all men away from her. The most persisting suitor of Persephone was Hades, the god of the underworld. He was a hard middle-aged man living in the dark among the shadows of the dead, but his heart softened when he saw Persephone and was amazed by her youth, beauty and freshness. When he asked Demeter to marry her daughter, Demeter got furious and said there wasn't the slightest chance for that to happen. Hades was heartbroken and decided to get Persephone no matter what. One day, while Persephone was playing and picking flowers with her friends in the valley, she beheld the most enchanting narcissus that she'd ever seen. As she stooped down to pick the flower, the earth beneath her feet suddenly opened, and through the gap, Hades himself came out on his chariot with black horses. He grabbed her, and before she could even scream for help, he descended into the underworld while the gap and the earth closed after them. So he essentially came up on earth, grabbed her, and disappeared. Ooh. The other girls had not seen anything because everything had happened very quickly. They didn't have a clue for the sudden disappearance of Persephone. The whole incident, however, had been witnessed by Zeus, as well as Helios, god of the sun. Zeus decided to keep silent about the whole thing to prevent a fight with his brother, while Helios thought it was better not to get involved with anything that didn't concern him. Now, Zeus and Hades were brothers, and Poseidon is also their brother as well. They decided to separate between them, like ruling over certain places. So Zeus rules over Olympus, Poseidon rules over the sea, and Hades rules over the underworld. A distraught and heartbroken Demeter wandered the earth looking for her only daughter until her good friend Hecate, the goddess of the wilderness and childbirth, advised to seek her for the help of Helios, the all-seeing sun god. So essentially she was like, yeah, if anyone's going to help you, Helios is going to be able to help you. I hope I'm pronouncing these names correctly. In order to help her find her daughter. Helios felt sorry for Demeter, who was crying and pleading with him to help her. Thus, he revealed to her that Persephone had been kidnapped by Hades, and when she heard that, Demeter got angry and wanted to take revenge, but Helios suggested it was not such a bad thing for Persephone to be the wife of Hades and queen of the dead. However, Demeter could not let it be gone. She was furious at this insult and deeply believed that Hades, who after all only had the dead for company, was not the right husband for her sweet daughter. She also got angry at Zeus for not revealing this to her, and to punish the gods and to grieve, Demeter decided to take a long indefinite leave from her duties as the goddess of harvest and fertility, with devastating consequences. The earth began to dry up, harvests failed, plants lost their fruitfulness, animals were dying for the lack of food, and famine spread to the whole earth, resulting in untold misery. So basically, she was so upset with this that no one had told her what had happened and that she wasn't allowed to do anything, that she was just like, I'm not going to do my job then. If you're not going to help me, I'm going to refuse to work. The cries of the people who were suffering reached Olympus and the divine ears of Zeus. The mighty god Zeus finally realized that if he couldn't do something about his wife's wife's wrath. If he wouldn't do something, all humanity would disappear. Thus, he tried to find another solution to calm both Demeter and please Hades. He promised Demeter to restore Persephone to her if it can be proved that if the maiden stays with Hades against her will. Otherwise, Persephone belongs to her husband. So he was basically saying that if it's proven that Persephone doesn't want to be there, I will make sure she comes back to you. However, if Persephone wants to stay with her husband, there's nothing I can do. The crafty Hades learned of this agreement and tricked his reluctant bride, who was crying all day and night from despair, to eat a few seeds of the pomegranate fruit. This was the fruit of the underworld, and every time someone ate even a few seeds of this, then, after a while, they would miss living in the underworld. When gathering in front of Zeus took place and Persephone was asked where she would like to live, she answered that she would like to live with her husband, and when Demeter heard that, she got infuriated and accused that Hades had somehow tricked her daughter. Now, I've heard and I've seen different renditions of this, that Persephone chose to eat the fruit of the pomegranate seeds, and that she chose to be with her husband, that it was offered to her. This is worded a little bit weirdly. It makes it sound like Zeus was, Hades was just basically like, hey, you're never going to leave me, here, have some pomegranate seeds. But from what I've read in other renditions of the story, he offered them to her and said, like, you will forever be tied to me, no matter what, because his wife was distraught because she wanted to be with Hades, but she also wanted to be with her mother. It's a bit weird, this rendition, and it does sound a little bit creepy, if I'm honest. But this is basically the story of a great fight followed, and Demeter threatened that she would never again make Earth fertile and everyone on Earth would die. To put an end to this quarrel, Zeus decided that Persephone would spend half months with her husband in Hades and half months with her mother on Olympus. This alternative pleased none of the opponents, and nevertheless, they had no option but to accept it. So essentially, Zeus was like, okay, here's a solution. If you're both not going to, do your jobs, because Hades was like, I'm going to refuse to work if you take Persephone away from me. And Demeter was like, well, I'm just not going to do my job if I don't get Persephone back. So he was like, well, why doesn't Persephone spend half of her time on Earth doing with her mother and half of her time in the underworld with her husband Hades? Thus, Persephone became the rightful wife of Hades and the queen of the underworld. During the 6 months that Persephone would spend in the underworld, her mother was sad and not in the mood to deal with the harvest. Thus, she would leave the earth to decline. According to the ancient Greeks, they were the months of autumn and winter, where the land is not fertile and does not give crops. Whenever Persephone went to Olympus to live with her mother, Demeter would shine from happiness, and the land would become fertile again and fruitful, and these were the months of spring and summer. Therefore, the myth was created to explain the change of seasons, the eternal cycle of nature's death and rebirth. So, essentially, the TLDR is Persephone was kidnapped, become husband, to become a wife to, not a husband, to a wife to Hades. And she saw a side of Hades that no one else had seen. He was soft and he was much more gentle than anyone had ever said. And she began to fall in love with him. But her mother started to refuse to do her job and, make the earth fertile for the humans, the mortals, to thrive and rejoice and to do worship upon the gods. And because she started to refuse, Zeus had to come up with a solution that would please both the gods. And from a lot of the renditions of the story that I've seen, some say that Hades forced the pomegranate fruit because he was afraid that Persephone would never come back to him. And in other renditions I've seen that she was offered it, and because she missed Hades and she wanted to be with him, she chose to eat the fruit. So there are different renditions of the story, but nevertheless, the whole story is to show the cycle of life and death, rebirth and to show the changing of seasons. And this is what was believed to be in ancient Grecian times. And it's for me, it's an interesting story. It can be what is considered today a little bit possessive, and I think that a lot of stories today are based on this fact that even though this person was kidnapped, they managed to fall in love with the person that became their kidnappee and see a side to them that it reminds me of Beauty and the Beast almost, but that she fell in love with someone who turned out to be a lot softer than they realized. And it's interesting to me to see the parallels between stories that are told today and what was told back in ancient Grecian times. I really think this story is fascinating. I think a lot of the Grecian mythological stories are interesting to read because you can see parallels to modern day storytelling now, and I think that it's important to go back and read these stories and see the parallels to how we tell our storytelling today. I think it's interesting. I don't know. What do you guys think? If you guys had taken part in this theme, what kind of thing would you have done? Would you have done followed a Grecian storytelling, or would you have done something that was a little bit different? Mythological characters can come up a lot of things. Like you can think of like maybe doing a D&D character, or maybe you're doing something that's following along folklore, like is fairies involved, gargoyles, all sorts. It's such a broad theme, but I was just so drawn to existing stories and that had already existed out there, mythological times and the legends of gods and goddesses, that I felt like it was best for me to do it this way. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Leave a comment down below in what you would have done for this theme, and if you do participate, be sure to tag me. I always get so excited when I see what kind of things that you guys would do for the very similar theme. If you want to tag me on Instagram or Twitter, or leave a link down below, you are more than welcome to. I like seeing other people's work. I get very excited, and I think it's a really good way to share your creativity and have fun with it, really. Make sure to check out everyone else's videos along the same theme. I hope you've enjoyed this little story time with me, and I hope you enjoyed this art piece. This original will be for sale up on my store, Envy Store, and prints of this will also be available up on my Redbubble store as well, which I'll leave links to down below. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Make sure to like down below, comment, and if you're new to this channel and you wish to see more content, maybe subscribe to this channel. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and hope you love drawing, being creative, and enjoy this beautiful weather that we're currently having at the moment. It's been actually really beautiful at the moment. It's really inspiring, gets the creativity juices all flowing. Hope you have a wonderful day, and as always folks, stay creative.